I told you the health crisis in America wasn't just about processed foods, stress, or lack of exercise? What if I told you there was more to the health crisis and it had to do with something most people never think about, the dirt beneath your feet? Hi, I'm Lauren Payne, and for the past 5 years, I've been obsessed with soil. Not just because it's my business, but because I've seen up close and firsthand how the degradation of our soil is literally making us sick. I started Elm Dirt because I learned something about health that I'd never discovered before. And I thought that by eating my vegetables, eating my vitamins, and exercising that I was doing everything right, taking care of my health. But then I learned something that most people had never heard of. I learned that healthy soil helps us grow healthy plants, which in turn helps us become healthier people. Now, this isn't some hippy-dippy theory. This is backed by decades of science research that most people, even doctors, haven't even heard of before. In the next hour, I'm going to show you how the soil health crisis is actually a human health crisis, how industrial agriculture has actually depleted the nutrition in your food by up to 40%, and soil microbes are actually connected to gut microbe populations, as well as how farm kids that grow up on farms actually have fewer allergies and autoimmune disease. And most importantly, I'm going to tell you what you can do about it, and you can even start today. By the end of this video, you'll understand why some of the world's leading health experts are saying that fixing our soil health might be the key to fixing our health epidemic. Before we dive into health connections, we need to understand what healthy soil is. Most people think that all soil is just dirt and that all dirt is the same, but that couldn't be more wrong. So let's take a look. So healthy soil is actually made of 50% solid components and 50% pore space. And so when we look closely at healthy soil, what we actually see is that 45% is made of minerals. So that's the sand and the silt and clay that make up what you typically think of as dirt. There's 25% that's water. Now, healthier soil that has more organic matter can hold more water, and so that may increase a little bit or decrease depending on how healthy your soil is. But that is also important because even if you can't see the water in your soil, it's still holding water, and that helps with drought tolerance. 25% of your soil is actually air, and air is important for plant roots to grow. And then the last 5% is actually a very important component. This is probably the most important component right here. This is organic matter, and this is where the microbes live. And the microbes here are a very, very important component that help build the building blocks for all life. They help supply the hormones that help plants grow. And this is a very healthy component of healthy soil and a very important component. We're going to talk a lot more about this section right here. All right, so I have 1 jar of healthy soil and 1 jar of non-healthy soil. So you can really see the difference between these two, and you can smell the difference. One smells healthy and earthy and is nice and soft and easy for plant roots to grow in. And the other is chunky and flaky, doesn't really hold together really well other than by the clay, and it's also something that you're gonna have to use a lot of synthetic chemicals to just get stuff to grow and keep it growing in. So there's a lot of difference between soils that are out there. This is just one example of the difference, and you can really see it. But if you buy soil from like a gardening center, a lot of them are actually sterilized. They actually go through a process where they make sure no microbes in there. What they're trying to do is prevent the spread of plant diseases, which is super important, don't get me wrong, but there are super important things that microbes in soil do. And so most healthy agricultural soil actually contain more microbes in it than people on Earth in just a teaspoon of soil. That's over 100 billion species and different types of microbes in 1 teaspoon of healthy soil. And so what we're trying to do is bring a little bit of that back into potting soil. And so what do soil microbes actually do? Yes, there's ones out there just like the ones in our body that make us sick. There are stuff out there that do make plants sick, and so that's the plant diseases and different things like that. But the other microbes are really important. So they help with the plants get their nutrients that they need, transport water. They help provide a net plants can talk across. They also release hormones that help increase plant growth. And so depending on the time of year, there might be specific microbes that trigger the plants to grow more roots. There are specific microbes that help trigger blooming and help strengthen plants so that they can grow easier. There are even microbes that help increase drought tolerance. There are microbes that help handle the different components in soil that make it hard to grow. So if you've got a higher salt content in your soil, there are microbes that help with that. There are also microbes that help in sandy soils that help lock in the nutrients and help lock in the moisture so it stays at plant roots rather than rinsing right through the soils that you have. Most people think that you just need to apply those synthetic fertilizers, the ones that have the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and you have to apply the biggest and best of all that's all balanced and specifically for your plants. But what I'm getting ready to tell you is the importance of having a balanced nutrition and focusing on really the soil health itself and how that affects the growth of your plants and eventually human health down the line. Here's where our story takes a dark turn. Since the 1940s, we've actually been systematically destroying our soil health. And we've been doing that with a big transition in industrial farming. So in the 1940s was actually when synthetic fertilizer was developed and released for farmers to use. And it was a great thing at the time because a solution to increasing yields to help try and feed the world. But what we didn't know at the time was the impact it would have on our soil system. So let's kind of break down what that looks like, why synthetic fertilizer is doing what it's doing and what it's actually intended to do and where we were at before we started introducing it. So back before 1940, we actually had where we were rotating crops. We were composting, working on different crops in different areas to do different things. So one of the things that's common in today's world is soybeans are rotated with, say, a corn crop. Soybeans introduce nitrogen to soil. They're called nitrogen fixing plants. And then that helps the corn grow because they're heavy nitrogen feeders. And so that's a good synergistic relationship between those two different crops. But before that, we rotated even more different diverse types of crops so that we can get different benefits from different types of crops. The other thing we introduced, so synthetic fertilizer is actually kind of more like supplements for crops. They are intended to increase just a specific amount of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium depending on the crop needs, which is really quite important. We know a lot more about what plants need because of that. But in the meantime, we help destroy the living organisms that are in there by introducing such a large shot of fertilizer at one time. That in turn leads us to have to use more pesticides and more fungicides. And so fungicides then destroy the fungal net. I talked about being super important to the communication of different plants, as well as transporting water and nutrients. We need even more synthetic fertilizer and even more water to grow the same crops. And then we introduce pesticides, and pesticides tend to kill all the bugs in the area, which can be easier for farmers to farm. But as I've talked to farmers in different areas of the Midwest, what we're seeing now is that there are no bugs on farms, which means the predators for those bugs, the birds, the quail, the pheasants, those are leaving the farms. And so when we see that, we start seeing ecosystems break down because now you don't have those animals on the farm that are helping replenish the topsoil. And so the actual topsoil on America has decreased over 30% since the 1940s. We've also seen a degradation in soil health. When the topsoil in particular is a huge problem because it takes 500 to 1,000 years to rebuild that topsoil. And now this isn't just a problem of soil health and a problem for farmers. This is actually a human health issue because over that whole time of destroying the soil health, and the soil health that I've talked about then leads to plant health. And you can see where I'm going here. That plant health leads to human health. And so that's going to be the next area we talk about, is how this soil health problem has affected our human health. Now, are you ready for the part that's going to blow your mind, but also make you a little bit angry? You ready? One apple today has significantly less nutrition than the apple that your grandmother ate in the 1950s. That's incredible. So it's not just a little bit less, it's dramatically less nutrition in one apple today. So if we take a closer look, this is a study from the Journal of American College of Nutrition, and they just did a study of the nutrition in crops between the 1950s and 1999. And what they found is the protein in wheat decreased by 23%. The iron in spinach decreased by 45%. Calcium in broccoli is down 48%. And vitamin C in tomatoes is down 16%. In oranges, you would have to eat 8 oranges in order to get the same vitamin A that your grandparents got in 1950. Now, this isn't something that's happened because of genetically modified crops. No, this is happening because of the depletion of nutrients in soil and the depletion of soil health. And so let's dive a little bit more into those connections. So what we see is depleted soil is actually leading to weaker plants, and weaker plants actually need more chemicals to help keep them alive, keep them producing. So that's where all of our synthetic chemicals are coming in the agriculture space, and those weaker plants then produce less food, which then leads to humans. And so what we're seeing is a lot of epidemics, lower iron in women. We're also seeing a lower magnesium quality. Heard talk about supplements, which it's actually because our food doesn't contain as much magnesium as it used to. And so that anxiety issues, insomnia, as well as muscle cramps. Zinc deficiencies lead to immune system issues. And then we have selenium deficiencies, which are also the thyroid issues. And we'll see a lot of human health impact just from the decrease in nutritional value of our food. To understand why this is happening, we actually have to take a closer look at how plants get their nutrition. And spoiler alert, it's not how most people think. So plants are not like sponges. They don't just soak up the nutrients they need. They actually get a specific amount when they need it, as they need it. And so that relies on the soil in the soil to be talking to the plant roots. And so what actually happens in the soil is the plants will talk to the soil microbes and tell them specifically what they need. Say, I need some phosphorus right now. And the soil microbes will be like, okay, I can get that for you, but I am going to need some of those sugars from your photosynthesis that you just produced. And so there's a complex marketplace that's happening down under our feet. And so fungal networks can increase the reach of roots by over 100 times, but they can also increase the nutrient uptake by 300 to 1,000% and help plants be 50 times more drought tolerant. And that's because those fungal networks reach farther down into the soil. But the fungal networks don't just work alone. They work with bacteria and they work with different things, different other organisms in the soil to help produce everything the plants need. There's different organisms for breaking down phosphorus. There's different organisms that pull nitrogen from the air. There's different microorganisms that help bring water or calcium or whatever they need up to the plant when the plants need them. And there is this complex system that helps feed the plants. And when we add a synthetic chemical, then we disrupt that whole thing. So synthetic fertilizer can actually destroy up to 80% of fungal networks in the area where you apply it. That 50 times more drought tolerance then disappears as you add in the synthetic fertilizer. And most synthetic fertilizer is actually salt-based, and so you need even more water to help rinse the salts up and increase the nutrient transport into the plants to be able to get that same result. And so that's why you see such high NPK levels, the nitrogen, potassium in synthetic fertilizer, is because they require so much more nutrition than just having a healthy soil in the first place. And then you have to add even more water on top of that in order to get the synthetic fertilizer to work, in order to get the plants to grow just the same way as you would without it. And so there's a really complex system underneath the soil that's important for growth. And those microorganisms kind of act like probiotics for the plants, as well as supplying the superfoods and all the whole foods that plants need to grow, whereas synthetic fertilizer is more like a supplement. But the trick is, added synthetic fertilizer, now your plants are hooked. Now it's acting like life support for your plants because it's destroyed that fungal network in the area. It's destroyed the microscopic living populations that are there. And now you need even more synthetic fertilizer to help grow your plants. And it's kind of a cycle that's hard to get out of. And your plants just will continue to need it once you've introduced it. Now let's take that soil health and connect it to human health, because there is definitely a connection between what we're doing to our soil and what's happening in our health. So we've talked a little bit about this, but let's dive into this in more detail. So deficiency is becoming more and more common, and it's not just because people aren't consuming enough iron-rich foods, but it's because the food isn't containing as much iron as it used to, and eat more of it than normal. So a perfect example of that is iron in spinach is by 45% since the 1950s. That's wild. 50% of the iron has decreased in our spinach in that time. Another one is zinc. Zinc is for immune function, healing, sometimes depression, and zinc has decreased in our food as well. A big magnesium. 50% of Americans are suffering from magnesium deficiencies. That's why we're seeing a lot more information on magnesium supplements. The magnesium in our food has also decreased by up to 25%. And magnesium, it can affect all sorts of different things: anxiety, insomnia, muscle cramp, even our heart rhythms. And so it's a really important one. Selenium is another one that people don't talk about. So selenium for thyroid function is a powerful antioxidant. And in some places, the selenium amount in the soil is so low that there isn't enough that plants can uptake for proper human health. So as the soil content gets depleted of minerals, so does the plants then get depleted of minerals, which leads to human mineral deficiency and causes human health issues. Now, it's a vicious cycle because as we add fertilizers and synthetic pesticides and all chemicals to our crops, then it's a vicious cycle. We've killed off the microbes that are needed to help build healthy soil, and we have to add even more of those things to help grow at the same levels we were before. But all's not lost. We are actually actively all working to try and fix that. The regenerative agriculture movement is working to actively restore soil health, and elm dirt has a very important part of that because all of our products really focus on restoring natural soil health, replenishing the soil microbe populations, as well as supplying organic sources for nutrients for your plants. When we restore soil biology, we actually restore the nutritional density of our food. And so some of those recent studies have shown that by focusing on the soil health and regenerative agriculture, we're going to be increasing the nutritional density of our food over time. It does take over 3 to 5 years to replenish that soil health. Dirt products can help jumpstart that process, make it faster, and help support the plants during that time until they can get to the point where the soil health has been established, and then elm dirt can help support the process along the way past that point. Now let's talk about the most fascinating connection between human gut health and soil microbe health. And so there is a connection there, and we're going to dive into it a little bit more, but I want to show you this parallel between the two. So what we've got is our healthy gut microbiome and our healthy soil microbiome, and as you can see, they both rely on the same sorts of things. So there's diverse bacterial communities, there's lots of fungi networks that are in both systems. And the interesting thing is that antibiotics can actually destroy both sides. So in our human healthy gut microbiome, when you introduce antibiotics, it can destroy our healthy gut. Now that's not to say antibiotics are bad. Antibiotics have their place. But our health of our human gut is very important. And when you introduce synthetic chemicals, whether that's antifungals, pesticides, fertilizers, it can destroy our soil microbes. And when we see that, we see effects on these areas down here. So our gut microbiome is responsible for some of our immune system. It helps defend us. It helps fight off the bad microbes that are in our body, and it helps us get rid of sickness faster. It supports digestion, getting nutrients into our bodies faster, helps support the health of the host, which in our case is humans. And then it affects our mental health. So gut bacteria actually affects whether we're depressed, whether we're anxious, and that can have a really big impact on our daily life. It's actually the same in plants. So in the plants, or in the soil, the plants are the host. And so the microbes are supporting the plant itself. And so it can support plant immune systems. It can help deliver nutrition to the plants. And It can help with their resilience. So when there is an environmental stress or a pest stress, any sorts of stresses in the environment, it can help the plant better resist those. And does that sound very similar to helping us resist the anxious and stress and all those responses from our environment, directing our human health? And so there's a really important link here between healthy gut in humans and soil bacteria. And there's an even more important connection between how those populations look today. So throughout history, our ancestors were very connected with the soil. They worked the fields, they were out in the dirt, they played in it, they spent a lot of time out there, and they didn't have as much access to cleaning materials, so their vegetables had more dirt on. They were eating a lot more healthy soil microbes, and that helped train their guts and their systems to be hardier, more resilient, and help better take care of their bodies. Today, we spend 90% of our time in kids are playing on our carpet, our hardwood floors, in more sterile environments. And what we're seeing is that kids that grow up on farms actually have lower allergies and lower asthma rates. They have more diverse gut bacteria. They have lower risks of autoimmune diseases. And there's just been so many different benefits that they're seeing on farm kids, and there's a whole different set of other things that go on out on farms, especially with the exposure of agricultural chemicals. But when you look at just the introduction of healthy soil and into our environment, into our play, there's a huge benefit there. And it's actually one of the reasons why I started Elm Dirt, is I was sitting there watching in our own backyard play in our soil dirt and worry about the things that she was eating. And not only that, impacting her own soil microbes in her body, or her gut bacteria in her body, and how that impacted her health. And now she's very healthy. I started this when she was 6 months old, and I've been happy to see the journey of my family through that time period. But I want my kids out in my backyard. I want them playing in the soil. I want them digging up dirt. I want them making, maybe not eating the mud pies, but at least playing with it and getting exposure to healthy soil that is made up of diverse populations, is not put with synthetic chemicals and all the different things that could be wrong with soil, because there is definitely a difference between playing with good soil and bad soil. So this leads us to the hygiene hypothesis. So this is a theory that as we have gotten better and sterilizing and getting microbes in our lives, we've actually been introducing an environment that helps make us sicker. So some of the statistics that say since the 1900s, so we had a high infectious disease rate. So those were like the Spanish flu and the different rates of epidemics that made us sick. But we also had low autoimmune diseases. So in that time period, we improved our sanitation. We had more improvements in healthcare, gotten more antibiotics, and so less people are having issues and dying from infectious diseases, which is super important. That was a huge step in healthcare. That's really important. But now we're starting to see higher rates of autoimmune diseases. So some of the things that we're seeing out there, higher rates of asthma, a 50% increase just from 1997 to 2011 in foods. We're also seeing 3 to 4% increase in childhood diabetes every year. And so some of that theory leads itself into where our gut microbiome is and how does that affect our autoimmune health, and how did our sanitation affect the human gut microbiome. So here's where soil health comes in. So we have shown in studies that people that regularly have contact with diverse microbe environments actually have stronger immune systems and more diverse gut microbiomes. And so that gut microbiome is then directly related to immune system health. But we've also created the perfect storm. So our soil at garden centers are typically sterilized soil, so they don't contain a diverse amount of soil gut soil microbe population. The soil in our backyards we've treated with synthetic chemicals killed off a lot of those diverse soil micropopulations. We don't regularly touch the earth a lot of time indoors. We sanitize a lot of stuff. We have less dirt in our homes, and we don't touch the earth as often as we used to. And so that's kind of led to this perfect storm. Now, when we see children that are raised in rural where they're touching the earth a lot more frequently, have a 40% decrease in asthma rates, they have 50% in allergies, they have immune systems, they have more diverse bacteria. But the trick is it has to be in contact with diverse soil microbe environments. And so that's a real big focus on what that soil health looks like. How are we treating the soil, and what is in contact with not only our bodies, our kids' bodies, and our pets' bodies. Now let's talk about some very specific soil bacteria that are revolutionizing the way we think of mental health. So this soil contains a bacteria, Microbacterium vaccae, and here's what. When researchers injected this bacteria into mice, it had the same effect as antidepressant medication. So for the research, Dr. Christopher at the University of Colorado that this specific bacteria activates the serotonin producing in your brain, anxiety and stress responses, improves learning and memory, and has effects weeks after exposure. In human studies, cancer patients treated with vaccae showed improved mood and emotional well-being, as well as better quality of life scores and reduced anxiety about their diagnosis. So when this specific bacterium, M. vaccae, is in the soil, it is inhaled or through skin contact. It can travel to the brain, activates serotonin neurons, and improves your mood. Pretty impressive. Some of the other bacteria that are out there, Streptomyces, one produces over 60% of our antibiotics, but in the soil, it helps regulate inflammation and supports immune function. Now, Bacillus subtili supports digestive health and has been shown to improve symptoms of IBS and other gut disorders. You'll see that commonly in food, but in soil, when you're touching the soil, when you're inhaling it, it can do those same things. Pseudomonas florensis, which is also produces compounds that support brain health and may help prevent neurodegenerative diseases. So all of this combines healthy soil, the healthy diverse microbiome also explains the garden effect. So the garden effect is how we say that garden is so therapeutic. So a lot of people report that when they go out and they garden, relax, they feel a decrease in stress. They feel much better working in their gardens. And so that's not just an exercise in fresh air, in moving your body, but it's also the connection with the soil and the soil microbes that are out there in a healthy garden system. And I can tell you from personal experience that when I started working daily with living soil, that my personal mood, sense of well-being also increased. And I started feeling much better myself. And I understand now that it's not so much just the passion that I have for dealing with this, but it's also the microbe medicine that I get every day by digging into the soil and working with the that we have on site. So let's connect soil health with the even bigger environmental crisis, the climate change. So when about climate change, soil is actually the biggest carbon reservoir on the planet. So if you look at the numbers about the amount of carbon that is in these different sections, so the atmosphere has 850 billion tons of carbon. And so this is the area where we're trying to reduce that number to try and slow or prevent climate change. Soil has 1,600 billion tons of carbon in it. That's twice what's in our atmosphere. And then plants store another 550 billion tons of carbon themselves. So these are incredible sources of carbon storage. And how this actually works is plants take in the carbon through carbon dioxide through the plant leaves through photosynthesis. Then they store it as sugars that they exchange with the soil in the soil. And when the soil microbes come up and they're like, hey, you want this phosphorus? I want those carbon-rich sugars that you just transferred from the air. And then those soil microbes take it and they store it underground where they can be stored for decades or centuries even. And So when you have healthy soil and you have this incredible carbon sink, so there's actually research out there that shows if you increase the amount of carbon holding capacity of soil across the world by just 0.4%, just 0.4%, it can actually take all of the carbon that we need to remove from an atmosphere right now. Just 0.4%. But the sad part is, because of our depletion of our soils, which is the largest amount of soils that we have, that is actually releasing carbon to the atmosphere. So instead of storing it with the soil microbes, we've destroyed those with our synthetic chemicals. We are now releasing carbon to the atmosphere, so much so that we've released 50 to 70% of the carbon out there through the destruction of our topsoils and our soil health. Now, the good news is that regenerative ag is actively trying to reverse this trend. So regenerative ag can actually increase soil organic matter by 200 to 300%. It increases the carbon sequestration, the storage of carbon in our soils. It improves the soil health, and it is also higher profitability for the farmers that implement it. The trick is that it takes 3 to 5 years to implement, but dirt products can help speed that process along. That's where our farmers are seeing a lot of success in helping aid that transition to regenerative and aiding their regenerative agriculture process so that they can become more profitable and also increase the nutritional density of their food, increase their carbon sequestration, and do all the right things on their farms. So there's an even larger discussion on the environmental topics too, about fertilizer runoff. And so we've all heard of in Florida, where the synthetic fertilizer is running off into the oceans, causing the algae blooms. That happens in a lot of our communities across the United States. I'm in Kansas, and we have blooms in the lakes every year too, because of that synthetic fertilizer runoff. And then in the Gulf, we also have the dead zone, which off the Mississippi River, there is a lot of agricultural runoff, synthetic fertilizer runoff, that then kills an area at the Mississippi River in the Gulf. And so what happens there is 50% of the synthetic fertilizer that's applied, especially to non-healthy soils, because that's generally where we're applying the synthetic fertilizer, it doesn't get locked in, and so then it runs off, and we apply 50% more than we need to, because we're losing 50% to our waterways, to our drinking water, where our water treatment plants have to remove the nitrates in our drinking water. Now, a healthy soil will actually retain more nutrients. It locks in more water and nutrients. It's got more organic matter to help hold it. The reason that is because the soil microbes actually produce hormones that help lock in the nutrients, then help hold it together. The microbes increase the amount of organic matter in the soils so that it can hold more water with drought tolerance, especially as we have more climate fluctuations. The other cool thing about soil microbes is they help remove pollutants. So if we've got some sort of toxicity in our soil from heavy metals, from bad bacteria or anything like that, the soil microbes can help remove it. They help lock it in place. They help keep it from running off. They help absorb it into their own bodies. Some plants will also do the same. And it's a good way to help make our soils healthy again too, by removing pollutants from them. And so in some cases, like the forest fires we see, there's pollutants in the soils after those fires, and soil microbes are really helpful in those cases from removing the toxicity that's caused by those forest fires, and getting the soil back to healthy quality so that we can grow more plants. The health of our soil affects the health of everything that lives above it. And when I say everything, I mean everything. Think of the foundation of like a house. The foundation is the supercritical part that helps keep everything above it stable and together and without cracks. This soil health is the foundation of life on our planet. And so you can see, I've drawn this out. So we have soil microorganisms, which are important for plants to grow. When you have plants growing, they bring insects and pollinators to their flowers, and then the birds come and they eat the insects and the pollinators. And then small mammals, so rabbits and foxes and little small animals will eat birds or insects and plants. and that will help them grow. And then that leads to the larger mammals. Larger mammals, sometimes those are like deer that eat the plants, or they're more like the carnivores like bears or coyotes that then eat the smaller mammals. And they're all interconnected, and so there's a big synergy between keeping a healthy ecosystem. And when you have healthy soil microorganisms, you actually help the pollinators, especially, a whole bunch, because that grows healthier plants. And so what we've seen in science research and in our anecdotal studies that we've done is that pollinators are actually preferentially attracted to plants that are with worm castings or with healthier soil, diverse soil microorganisms, because those plants grow with more nutrition, more protein for the pollinators, the bees and the butterflies. And so they also sense that, they can smell that, and they are attracted more to those plants that are fed with more diverse micro populations. And that leads to better pollinator immune systems, better pollinator health, and makes them more likely to survive. And when we have more pollinators, that also leads to longer blooming seasons and better blooms for us. And then we get the joy of just seeing butterflies flying around and enjoying our flowers in our own homes. So over the last decade, we've actually lost 40% of our pollinators. The last decade, 40% of our pollinators are gone. Think about that for a second. Now, that isn't just due to pesticides, which are a problem, yes, but it's also due to our soil health. So when I was talking about our pollinators, soil health leads to healthier plants, which then helps supports the immune system of our pollinators. And when we have healthier pollinators, they can survive better and not get thrown off by so many environmental stresses. And so there's a large issue there that's related to soil health. And the good news is we're actually seeing it in action. So when we transition to regenerative farms, and I have personally seen this on the farms. I've talked with farmers that are traditional farmers, and they've talked about the lack of bugs on their farm and how that's led to a lack of birds on their farm, and they have a lack of deer on their farm, and they're losing their ecosystems. But I've also heard the other side with regenerative farmers who are seeing those populations come back. And so when they switch to regenerative agriculture over the next 3 to 5 years, we see those populations come back. And so then we see the increases in the beneficial insects. We see the increases in the amounts of birds and the amounts of other ecosystem that's surviving there. We also see in water quality in nearby streams, the better soil structure and increased water retention. I've seen personally farms where it rains and the water top, and that's bad soil structure. But I've seen others that just like soaks in, and it's like a sponge, and you walk out there after a rainstorm and it literally feels like it's a sponge because it's soaked in so much water. And that is important because it holds more water, which means we apply less. As humans, we have to do less irrigations. We have to do less to our farms. But then they're also more drought tolerant because they hold that water longer. And so when we go a stretch without rain, that soil has more water to supply the plants longer and better and even more. So it's easier to grow those plants. This is why what we do at Elm Dirt is so important. Every time someone chooses to replace synthetic fertilizer, healthy microbes, or even use it alongside the synthesizer, they're supporting healthy soil. And by supporting healthy soil, you're supporting healthy plants. And by supporting healthy plants, you're supporting healthy pollinators. And then that supports even more plant diversity that is easier to care for, which then makes more healthy soil. And it's a big loop too on the good end, where we're generating more healthy soil and we're doing more good in the world. And so making that switch to Elm Dirt's living soil products, living liquid products, is really important to help support your own healthy soil journey. All right, now the moment you've been waiting for, what you can actually do about it. So we've been talking all about soil health and how it can affect everything from your gut microbiome to the environment to pollinators, and you don't have acres of farmland to be able to make a difference. You can actually make a difference in your own balcony with your own containers. What most people start with is some sort of crumbly, sterilized, dry soil that is completely lifeless. Okay, we want something that is healthy. So healthy soil holds together, it retains moisture, it's dry, it's crumbly, it's dark, it's rich with nutrients, and it's a great place to start for soil health. We want something that's not sterilized, we want something that is living and healthy, and Elm Dirt provides our ancient soil. It's one of our soil amendments, so this is not a soil on its own. You combine it with others, you can spread it on the ground you already have and start your journey today. So this is a complete mix of microbes plus healthy soil in it. We've got kelp meal, azomite, bat guano, and worm castings in here. So worms impart their good gut microbiome into their worm castings, which is worm poop. And that is a great way to get a diverse microbe population in there. So many benefits. And this is a great way to just take a little bit and you can top of your container, you can put it in the holes that you dig to plant new plants. You can spread it around the base of your plants and increase your soil health immediately. And as the microbes in here go out and they interact with the soils around it, they're going to be breaking down more organic materials. They're going to be helping the plant roots. They're going to be multiplying. They're going to be thriving. And so this is a great way to get started, as well as with our plant juice and bloom juice, our liquid ways to just get started immediately. So when you're working to improve your soil, there's a few things that I would do first. So I would get the soil test to test where you're starting with, what soil nutrients are already in there, maybe what bacteria are already in there, how alive or dead is your soil. Then you're going to want to add organic matter. So that's compost, a lot of compost that you can buy. A lot of those that are sterilized, there's some that are in your city. You can also get started with your own compost. I'll talk about that in a second, and how you can compost your own materials. And then you want to inoculate with microbes. So we got to jumpstart the microbe population somehow. Elm Dirt products are great. We provide a very diverse microbe that is living and ready to go. All you got to do is apply either our liquid or our soil amendments, and it's ready to use for you, and then feed them. Our soil amendments and our liquids are fully fed. You can continue feeding them with more organic matter, so that continues the cycle. Just keep watering them, keep feeding them, and they'll keep living for you. And so that's where you protect and maintain them. Don't apply fungicides especially. And if you are going to apply synthetic fertilizer, you inoculate again afterwards, so that you keep the microbe populations thriving afterwards. Compost is a great way to increase your soil composition immediately. And so when you compost yourself, it's really easy to get started. You want to use 70% browns to 30% green material. 30% green material is your food scraps from your kitchen. The grass clippings from outside. Brown material is things like paper waste or dead leaves that you can add into there. But there's a important ratio there to get the compost started and really accelerate your compost so that it can be done in 6 months. And no, you don't have to have a large garden or a large space to be able to improve your soil health. You can do it in your containers. You can have synthetic chemicals, and you can have good soil health in your containers on your balcony. And that's a great way to introduce gardening into your life if you've got just a small balcony space. And you can be working with the soil and introduce more soil into your life so that you can get some of the benefits as well. And then the final step is we have to our regenerative farmers. So our regenerative farmers steward a lot more land than we individually have as homeowners. And it's really important that they keep up their techniques and they keep working, and we can get more transition to regenerative agriculture, increase the food density that we're getting through stores, and increase our own health, and also help increase the amount of carbon sequestration on our farmlands. So the ways you can support your regenerative farmers is by shopping organic. Those organic farmers don't necessarily mean that they're regenerative, but that's a great starting place. If you're shopping at farmers market, or you're shopping at which are community supported agriculture. I highly recommend you look up what CSA farms are in your area. Specifically ask them about regenerative agriculture techniques and how they're working their farms. Do they reduce tillage? Do they introduce organic material? Do they have crops that they're using? And what other regenerative techniques do they have that they've introduced onto their farm? And we got to support them by vote, the way we purchase, and the organizations that we support. We're doing our part at Elm Dirt to reach out to regenerative farmers. We work with regenerative farmers. We supply to homeowners, which we started with homeowners. You guys, we love you. It's my passion because that's where I started, but we realized several years ago that farmers also needed our products, and so we support through our efforts. We supply bills to our farmers with made sustainable fertilizer to help them replenish their soil health, and we just have to do the most we can to help support each other in our transition process. And it's not always an overnight process. It's a step-by-step, one thing at a time, and so we got to pick our battles and choose the easiest steps first. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed my discussion about soil health and how that impacts human health as well as our environment around us. I'm Kane. I'm the founder of Elm. I started Elm Dirt because of my passion, my daughter in my own back and her dirt and eating her dirt, which isn't a great activity to be in, but it opened my eyes to what else is out there and what is in our soil and what is healthy versus the soil that might already be in our backyard. And I started that journey 5 years ago, and I'm sharing it more with more people because I know you all feel the same way. So guys, to like this video, I need you guys to reach out and tell us about your concerns, how we can help you, and comments on what you've done in your own personal lives, because we want to hear all the stories. We love hearing the stories, sharing the stories, and I'd love to hear yours.